Hi guys, this is Mr. Gravakis. I'm just going to talk to you guys about a little bit on, well, we have 4 methods now to solve quadratics, right? What one is the best one to use? Because in your work for this week, you are going to have to solve using all 4 ways only once. So you have to pick which option is the best option given the equations that you're working with. So here are a few things to be asking yourself, to be aware of as you are trying to figure out what way is best to solve the given quadratic. So there are a few guiding questions and steps to consider as you guys are trying to figure out how to solve. So the first thing is setting the equation equal to 0. Now I know that this doesn't necessarily work when we're doing the solving by square roots or solving by completing the square, but we won't know what's in our best interest unless we set it to equal to 0 first. The next thing after we do that is we want to determine if the square root method is best because this one's the easiest to pick out. This one is the one where bx is missing, the middle term is missing. So square root method is the easiest one to pick from to determine if that would be the best method. If there is a b term, then the next question we would ask is it factorable? So if you can get it to factor really, really quickly, ideally that's the best way to go about working with that particular example. If factoring does not work, you can complete the square if certain things happen. If a is 1 or a can easily become 1 without any issues like fractions or anything like that, then you'd want to consider that for completing the square. The other thing that you'd want to consider is if b is even. This is the ideal pattern to work with completing the square. If your a is 1 and your b is even. If this is the case, then that should be an option for a way to solve that example. If all else fails, the go-to would be the quadratic formula. So I reiterate, your work for this week will have you work on 4 questions at a time, and you only are able to use each method once on each homework assignment. So you have to pick which method you use wisely. There are more than one option sometimes for the given situation, but you want to take that into consideration with the other examples that you've been given to work with. So let's go through a few and determine which method is the best for the given situation. I am not going to solve these individually in this video, but if you would like to look at the work done out for each of them with the appropriate method, you can check the completed notes in the Google Drive. All we are doing in this video specifically is identifying which way we would solve each of these examples. So the first one, we have to get equal to 0 first and then determine what we want to do for that one. So we have a 9n squared minus 18n, and then we would want to add the 90 over to the other side, equals 0. We have a b term, so we can't square root. So the next thing that we would try to do is factor. We do have a GCF, so we can consider that. Everything is divisible by 9, so we could take that into consideration. So we could end up dividing everything by 9. So then we'd get n squared minus 2n plus 10 to work with. So now looking at that, we want to see if we can factor. So what multiplies to 10 and adds to -2? think for a second, nothing does. So the next thing we want to check is if completing the square might be an option. So do we have a equaling 1? We do. We made that happen with taking a GCF out. Is the middle term even? It is. So completing the square for this one would be the best option to solve. So that means that the other 3, I now no longer have the option to complete the square because I decided that number 1 would be the best option to complete the square with. So now number 2, I have 3 options now. I have either factoring, quadratic formula, or square root. So let's get this equal to 0 first. Subtract 2x over to the other side. I already have 11x minus 12. So we still have a b term, so no square roots here. So that leaves us with either factoring or quadratic formula. So again, quadratic formula is your last ditch effort if all else fails. So let's see if factoring might work for this. So I'm thinking what multiplies to negative 60 and adds to 11. So if you think just a little bit on that, you'll end up finding out that it does work with 15x and negative 4x. So this is a factoring situation. So this one would be the one we pick to factor. And again, if you want to see this done out, check the completed notes. So that means for the last 2, I've already said completing the square for one and factoring for the other. So that leaves square root and quadratic formula for my options. So for our number 3, I have 16p squared minus 81 equals 0. Now, if you're going through this quickly and not trying to work through your guiding steps that we've shown you, you might want to factor this, and you might see that it's factorable because it's the difference of squares, right? So this would be 4p minus 9, 4p plus 9. Well, okay, but didn't we already pick one to factor? So even though the thought of this is factorable, we still want to use square root. But we can at least use this idea of factoring to help us figure out what our final answer should be, right? So don't 100% disregard the factoring idea from this, but we want to see the work done as solving by square roots. So that means that this guy is probably a quadratic formula situation. So let's break down as to why that might be. So first we want it to equal 0. I don't like when this leading term personally is negative. So I'm going to add it to the other side. So we have 8t squared plus 8t minus 19 is equal to 0. So then let's go through our checklist. The first thing that we check for is the middle term. We have one, so square root isn't an option. The second thing we want to check is if it's factorable, and you're going to find out that nothing does. We can divide everything by 8 to get a equal to 1, but then we have 19 eighths at the end, and then also the middle term would be odd once we divided by 8. So completing the square could be an option, but it's not under the ideal circumstances. We could get a to be 1, but then b would end up being odd. So we would have some fractions and fractions. So ideally for this situation, we would solve this one by quadratic formula. So that's how your thought processes should go with all of the homeworks that are related to this content. You should work through your steps, see which situation best fits which method, and only pick one for each worksheet. If you'd like to see the work done out for all of these according to the methods that were chosen, take a peek at the filled in notes in the Google Drive.